and there'll be opportunity to unmute or use our chat room to share some thoughts, but it'd be helpful if we remain muted, but glad that you're all joining us this afternoon.
We're good. So let's begin. I really appreciate Rabbi Prosnit, very, very busy Friday before Shabbat being with us. And all of you, we have large numbers. We are approaching, we have a lot of people registered, and we're already approaching 50 screens. So it's been a difficult 2 weeks now. Again, we're grateful for the fact that the Colleyville, Texas event ended without harm to our people, although the death of the assailant, as you know. Rabbi Prosnit and I thought that Bret Stephen's piece in the New York Times on January 23, An Anti-Semite's Dangerous Fantasy, was worth unpacking. There are many issues there that are raised. I want to just review a couple of them quickly before we get into them. Just a few highlights from the article, which I trust most of you had a chance to look at. The hostage taker said, "I know President Biden will do things for the Jews. America only cares about Jewish lives." The FBI said shortly after, the Texas synagogue hostage standoff is not related to the Jewish community. They walked that back about 4 or 5 days later. Stevens talks about the fact that the dangerous fantasy, which we'll come back to, of the, I'll call them terrorists, has successive mutations, and anti-Semitism takes on a variety of mutations. Some of them, they go back in history. The common denominator is the idea based in fantasy and conspiracy about Jewish power. Present-day anti-Zionists attribute to Israel and its supporters in the US vast powers to control US government and funding. And the fantasy about Jewish power may seem outlandish, but it's more pervasive than many think. And then finally, a moral conviction of our time, especially prevalent on the cultural left, is that the powerful are presumptively bad while the powerless are presumptively good. Stephen says it's bad enough that the foul anti-Semitism of the right, yoked to the old themes of nativism, protectionism, nationalism, isolationism, is erupting into the public square like a burst sewage pipe. But now American Jews also have to deal with the anti-Semitism of the left, and the fact that, as Stephen sees it, the progressive left has decreed that privilege is a sin, that those who hold power should be stripped of it. And finally, something that I hope we'll come back to at the end, what's the future of American Judaism? What does it look like? Is our luck running out? So, having quickly introduced that, Rabbi Prosnit and I would like to talk just a little bit about what's this business about Jews controlling the world. And Rabbi, you want to?
Yeah, so we're glad. Thank you, Rabbi Kroloff, for being in conversation with me, and we want to be in conversation with you as well. So there'll be opportunity, of course, to unmute, and we'll ask you questions. And if you have any comments, or please put it in the chat box for us to see. We would love to be, while we can be in dialogue, I think it's important for our community to be in dialogue as well.
Mhm.
And I also want to say I did not become a rabbi to, and I don't think Rabbi Kroloff did, to be experts in anti-Semitism. And we talked a lot about this the past couple of weeks, that I don't think anti-Semitism the trend is upward and it's disturbing. I don't think that's the reason to be Jewish, though. And we can get back to that as well. Not to, I think we need to be proud, and I don't think it should be our sole understanding of who we are. And so this conversation is important, but it's also important to discuss why else are we Jewish, and why else do we combat things. And unfortunately, anti-Semitism can be understood throughout history as a convenient hatred. Right? We are of the other, and that's historical. That goes back all the way to the ancient world, right? Where it was hard to tell between Jews and non-Jews in the ancient world. The only difference was that Jews prayed to one God, and we were monotheist, and the other communities, the other civilizations prayed to multiple gods. And because of that, that's the origin of Jewish hatred. Right? Could that group be trusted? They practice differently. The differences are our challenges. And so when we are with other communities, when we're with other civilizations, they look at us differently because of the way we practice. And so it's convenient to say these Jews control the world, or this is the Jews that cause these issues because of our differences. And so throughout time, right, we talk about as when the Romans ruled Israel, the new religion emerged, right, of Christianity. And so there was Roman persecution. Jews were persecuted at that time. And there was a changing understanding through the Gospels and the New Testament that have not always been favorable to Jews. And that as the gospel spread, and people pull out one or two lines from the Gospels, from Matthew, right, or John, and saying that the Jews were there with Pontius Pilate, like before Jesus was crucified. There is that's how it spreads. I could say that Jews did not, and historians have refuted the idea that Jews were the ones that crucified Jesus, as we are not, that wasn't part of our tradition, but that's how it spreads. And I think that's a good reminder to things, how do things spread today as well, right? Jews have been on the fringes of communities and have created this, because of our differences, or because of some statements that are found in New Testaments, we are the other. And so, right, in John it says, you are of your father the devil, right? So the Jews are the devil, or Jews are the people that are causing evils to happen around you. And so as those ideas develop and Christianity spreads even further, we as Jews are scapegoated and are thought of in a way that breeds anti-Semitism. So anti-Semitism in the historical idea has been spread out throughout our lives and throughout our history. And I think a big example of that in the very 13th century and the Black Death, right? When I was in college, I did a whole thesis on why did anti-Semitism continue to flourish during the Black Death? And through my research, right, it looked like, there was fewer fatalities of Jewish communities during the Black Death. And why is that? On a practical level, right, the Jews lived in their own communities. So the spread wasn't as much, as well as perhaps we have different dietary restrictions, and the spread didn't, or we have different wells. And so, maybe it didn't spread, and they weren't wearing masks back then, but the idea that we were more contained. And so because the perception was Jews weren't dying of the Black Death as much, they're the ones causing this sickness, right? They're the ones that are tainting the wells. They're the ones that are spreading the disease to the non-Jews. And so we see the origins of anti-Semitism by looking at a community that's might be sometimes that had to be separate from each other, and that has caused they're so powerful. They have the power to cause sickness. They have the power to destroy communities. And so we need a reason. We need to have an understanding, and we focus on that.
So then anti-Semitism mutated, as we all know too well, in the 20th century. Germany post-World War I had to have a scapegoat and a reason for its philosophy in the 20s, and then of course its anti-Semitism of the 30s and Hitler. And there's a direct line there, blaming the Jews for the Germany's loss in World War I and the Versailles Agreement, which Germans felt put them at such a great disadvantage, picked up by Nazi sympathizers in America, like Father Charles Coughlin and Gerald L.K. Smith, notorious anti-Semites of the 30s and 40s, who, among others, accused Jews of pushing the United States into World War II, that it was the Jewish war. And Roosevelt dealt with a lot of those issues. And then now Israel, according to the Canard, tells the US government what to do, fueled by and multiplied by the ultimate multiplier, which is social media, and COVID as well, right, Rabbi Prosnit?
Absolutely. I think, unfortunately, we are. I think a little bit back to the Black Death in that sense, and Herb Mason wrote, right? I think a good analogy we have in the chat box was that anti-Semitism is a disease in that sense, right? It spreads, and unfortunately, the idea that Jews brought COVID onto this world is something that has been starting to spread on left and right. Social media and campaigns. We've seen flyers in San Francisco and Atlanta, where it's a whole thing that Jews conspired to bring COVID to the masses, or they're the ones that funded the Wuhan clinic out there. And so that's the reason. So the Jews mastermind all of this. There have been reports, I think the AJC actually just put out a report, or maybe a couple of months ago, about like the anti-Semitism tick because of COVID. And these conspiracy theories that we have the power to do all of this, and it's a trend line. And I think when at moments, right, a disease can really spread really quickly. And so I feel we're at a moment where anti-Semitism is spreading really quickly because we need to grip onto something. We don't have the answers to everything. So who do we blame? We blame the Jews, and we saw that during the Holocaust. We saw that during the Crusades. We've seen that throughout the life, and here is a moment where we are seeing that as well.
No, if you're not muted, I urge you please to mute, because every cough is heard around the world. We'd like to ask you to share. Have you had any experiences with this, what I'll call a canard, this heinous falsehood? Jews controlling the world, and your reaction to that. Any comments that you'd like to enter in the chat room, preferably in the chat room, though if you raise your hand, you can unmute as well. I'll give you a moment there. Incidentally, anti-Semitism is a disease. The word inherited is worthy of, it's passed on from generation to generation. It is, and it's contagious. It's very contagious. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, I see Howard Cohen has his hand.
Howard, please.
Now, I strongly feel that we are the victims of our own successes. I mean, if you are not Jewish, especially in the US, and you take a look around you, you certainly see Jews in the newspapers and controlling some of the key newspapers. You certainly know that Jews are extremely strong in Hollywood and have been for 100 years. You look at our government and you see a disproportionate number of Jews in Congress. You look at the people that the government appoints and you see that the head of the Federal Reserve Bank seems to be Jew after Jew after Jew. And while I think these are all good and wonderful things, if you are not Jewish, I think it's very natural to have a little bit of a feeling that we do have power well beyond our numbers. And certainly I think we could all agree that's true to some extent, but to nowhere near the extent that the extremists are putting out.
Have you ever asked a non-Jew, as I have, what percentage do you think of the American population is Jewish? Have you ever asked them that? I have done that, and the answers I get range from 25% to 50% of America is Jewish. I think, true. The answer, as you probably know, is 2%. And when I tell people that, they absolutely cannot believe it, and that really is a reflection of what Howard was just describing. Any other comments on this?
Just so Herb is addressing, Jews are driven by education and success, and when the success is apparent, it becomes one of control. There's a type of jealousy involved. And so I think absolutely, right? When people might look at the successes and say, oh, look at how did that happen? Or how did they get there, right? Or they must have done something. Maybe if they worked really hard, right, and they were successful and had really good education, but there must have been something that they did. They paid off someone, or they did something to make sure that they were able to become that powerful person as well.
In the 19th century, being a scholar didn't exactly pay off. And that's what we did, and there was a lot of, Jews would study. What's happened in the second half of the 20th century and the 21st, as you know, is that intellect has become more valuable than brawn. It's not because Jews made it that way. It's just that's how it's happened. Scientific developments and so forth, and therefore those qualities that we have been incubating and inculcating over the years suddenly have had a payoff, and college education is significant. Much more so than it was in years past. So this has, as you've all noted, fed this. So let's.
I saw two hands. Sorry, Rabbi Kroloff. I saw Ronnie Epstein and then Ruth Brewster.
Please.
On
Ronnie
September
and
12th.
Ronnie.
Did you?
Hello.
Yeah, Ronnie. Yeah, I think Ronnie, and then we'll have Ruth.
In response to where we were before about incidents that we have witnessed, believe it or not, I'm still working, and I have a lot of people on my staff. I'm a broker who are immigrants from other countries, and they refer to some of our clients as that Jewish client of mine. And I have said to them, would you say that Colombian customer of mine? But it's generally the Jewish customer. And it's not said with malice, it's just like as a way of explaining. Now, we have a situation going on in the real estate world where there are a lot of acquisitions taking place, and there are a lot of Orthodox Jews that are buying up almost everything in sight. They're buying for cash. From my staff is seeing this, and they're showing assets of like $74 million. I'm quoting exactly a number. Coming from New York. And what do you think is the feeling of the people that are struggling to make a living in my office, because I'm in Elizabeth? What do you think is their reaction to that? And how do you handle it?
And that's the key question, Ruth. How do you handle it? And we want to come to that. We're going to save some time for that. Ronnie Epstein?
Thank you. September 12th, 2001, returning to work the next morning, I worked in the education sector. One person, colleague, came up to me telling that the Jews orchestrated the attack, perpetuated it, and made it happen. This is people with undergraduate and master's degrees.
Extraordinary. Extraordinary. We're going to let that stand for a moment, and but we're going to come back to this. Rabbi Prosnit, should we go on, or is there somebody else?
No, we can go on.
Okay, we'll go on. We'd like to ask the question, why don't people acknowledge anti-Semitism? By people, I think we mean both Jews and non-Jews. Jews are often slow to acknowledge anti-Semitism. I think Rabbi Prosnit and I both want to make a kind of a confession. At least I shouldn't confess for you, I confess for me, but we did discuss it. That a few years ago, I think we felt that anti-Semitism, as it expressed itself, certainly locally, was a middle school kid acting out with a swastika here or there. It was not high on our concern list. Today, it's very, very different. You want to add anything to that, Rabbi?
Not at this moment. I would love to hear
Sure.
why
Yeah,
people
let's
don't
hear.
think that.
Sure.
Yeah, why
Yeah.
people don't think that we recognize anti-Semitism, or like as Stephen said, right? Why did the FBI kind of say, oh, it was that they didn't attribute it to anti-Semitism at the very beginning? Why did they have to backtrack on their statements? Why is that? Yeah, Susan Dixon.
I'm not sure if I know the answer why. I believe because it's not the thing to do. It's just not the thing to say or the thing to do. And what I would like to question or add to that is two incidents that I want to refer to that happened a number of years ago. And I'm going to call it latent or hidden anti-Semitism, where people don't like to say out loud anti-Semitic things because they know better than to do that. So this goes back many, many years ago. When I was in France, I was at an outdoor concert. I happened to be by myself, and there were some people sitting in front of me who were French, and they met this person who they knew, and they greeted this person, oh, it's wonderful to see you, et cetera, et cetera. Then the person walked away, and in French, they were discussing, and what they said, and I couldn't believe it, he is a dirty Jew. And I thought to myself, I'm sitting right behind these people. Do I, first of all, as a Jew, second of all, as a foreigner, do I say anything to them? And I think maybe they knew I was American, but maybe they didn't know I understood. What did I do? I kept my mouth shut. Another incident that I'd like to refer to is a friend of mine whose parents, her mother was French, her father was American. They met during the war, but she did not, quote, look Jewish. She didn't act Jewish. She was at a meeting. I worked with her a number of years ago in Washington, D.C. And she was present where people were talking about one thing that led to another. And the next thing you know, they were talking about the individual in a derogatory fashion. And what did they say? That person is a dirty Jew. And this person who considered herself Jewish said, please stop that. I happen to be Jewish and I don't want to hear you saying anything like that. So I commend her for that. She told me about it and we talked about it. So getting back to your question, there's not only people are reluctant to recognize anti-Semitism, but reluctant to speak up about it. And I think that goes for Jewish people, but also non-Jews are reluctant to come out and say things, but they say them secretly. So, or secretively, I should say. So is there less anti-Semitism? Or is it being covered up more? I mean, where do we stand with that? I think it's always been around. Has it become more blatant? Yes, is my answer. But I don't know the answer to your question, except to say, I don't think it's the type of thing we're supposed to talk out loud about.
Thank you, Susan.
Another reaction to that?
Gene
We
Rosner.
we have one in the chat box. from
Gene
Joanna.
Rosner wrote something too. Yeah, Gene.
Yeah,
Well,
I want to add to what Susan just said. I think the silence in part is due to our perception that this is a more recent phenomenon. I think that anti-Semitism has always been here. It's been latent. But I think in the last 4 or 5 years, and I don't want to get too political, I think the rock has been lifted up and it has become much easier to publicly express anti-Semitism. And I think that the Jewish world is still in a little bit of shock over that. We are overcoming that shock, I think, and are becoming more willing to speak up when we hear it. I mean, I'm looking back at my life, and in all honesty, I am not aware, or I've not been aware of many instances of people reacting to me as a Jew. And I dare say that many of us are in that same position. I think we're starting to fear that now with this, what I'm calling recent phenomenon.
No, thank you for that. I'd like to just read what Joanna Rice wrote, quoting Elie Wiesel: "Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented." So addressing the issue of silence, I'd like to come out on behalf of calling on Jews and non-Jews to speak up much more than we have in the past, more than we may be comfortable. I realize that it carries some risks, but I think silence is not an option. Others?
Yeah, sorry, I was the one who put in the quote. So I just wanted to expand on that a little more, in that I recently went to the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum back in December. And one thing that they really focused on that I had never seen or hadn't noticed as much, that maybe I noticed more recently, was their entire section on upstanders and who the allies were for the Jews and which countries and which people who weren't Jewish stood up and did something. And so, Rabbi Kroloff, I think what you just said is an important thing to focus on, that the Jews are, less than 1% of the world's population. It is up to everyone else to become an ally and stand up when they see anti-Semitism. And so I think it's important for Jews to continue to stand up and fight it, but we can't do it alone. We've clearly, so I don't know.
Well, totally agree. And your comment and Larry Seltzer's comment in the chat room, what about the Westfield clergy speaking up, is a perfect segue to the next area that Rabbi Prosnit and I wanted to speak about. And I'd like to turn to him now because he's our man in terms of interfaith clergy, to share what have been your experiences now, especially in the past few weeks and beyond, in terms of the interfaith community.
Absolutely. After Colleyville, there was a lot of conversation among fellow my colleagues and rabbis, and saying, where were my interfaith? I didn't hear from my interfaith colleagues. I didn't hear from them. Like I reached out when there was a shooting at a church, or when there's an incident that happens at a Black church. I meet them, and there was silence. And so I would say that here in Westfield, in the greater Westfield area, some of my colleagues did reach out, and I was very appreciative of that. They emailed me and said, let us know if we need it. Did all of them? No. But then, and I shared this last Friday in my reflection, my next door neighbor, we had we were in Connecticut, and there was a police car in front of my house, and they reached out and said, we wanted to check in, make sure everything's okay. and they know what I do. Right, we're here, and we need you. We don't see the uproar as much on social media from other of our non-Jewish friends when something like this happens, and that's disturbing. And I then emailed to all of my colleagues here, and I need you. I need you to show up, and I need you to be a part. I need you to come to services, and I need you to say, I'm here in solidarity with you. And I got nice responses back. Not everyone showed up, but we had someone on this past Friday. We had someone on Shabbat services on Saturday of the Presbyterian Church. And we can talk about the Presbyterian Church too, because that's his challenges there. We have someone coming tonight on Friday, right? They know, and I had a meeting with all of our clergy yesterday with the mayor as well, and said, we are concerned, and we need your voices. And after the swastikas happened, they said they preached about it. I emailed in Westfield Public Schools. I asked them to preach about it, and there was a statement in the St. Helens Church about anti-Semitism, and someone reached out to a congregant and said that had never happened before. We shouldn't be asking. We shouldn't have to ask, but I think right now we need to be advocates for ourselves and say this is what we need, and because I don't think my colleagues always know. Now they know my concern, right? People drive by our synagogue and see the concerning our bollards that are in place not because there's a risk, not because there's a threat right now, but we don't know. And so by sharing that with our friends of other faiths, by letting people know I need you, or this is how I'm feeling, and that's what I did with my colleagues. And I think we got the point across that I need them to speak out, and I need them to stand with us at those moments too.
So I think it's outstanding that you've done that. I was thrilled that Pastor Jeremy of Presbyterian Church, he's the senior pastor at
Absolutely,
Presbyterian Church, and they're kind of a big deal there. He was at Simchat Shabbat last time. That's a big change. Some of you lived through the anti-Semitic experiences with us here at the temple in the 70s, Christmas pageant, which we've written about, in the parking lot later on, all that. And we got, certainly in the 20th century, before 2000, we got zero to no support. And that has changed. Now, it's not true in every community. Rabbi Mark Katz up in Bloomfield said the other day that he heard from nobody in that first week.
And I think it's really important that we need to build relationships, right? We need to be at tables with people that are, and I think that's how we fight anti-Semitism, right? We need to be a relationship, and that's why we are working very hard to create relationships across lines of difference, right? And across lines of faith, to say, like, this is what I'm experiencing, and I need you. And sometimes we might have opposing views on other issues, but I think that's okay. But I need to be able to have a conversation with my clergy that might think differently. And then I could say to my Presbyterian pastor, and we could talk about this in a second, they just put out something about Israel as an apartheid state. And then I could tell Jeremy, like, because we have a one-on-one relationship, we have a nice relationship. I've invited him over to my sukkah, why this is an issue, and what I need you to say to the Presbyterian Church. It's just, right. He's one church here, right? Is he can make a huge impact? No, but I need to be able to express my feelings and my thoughts to him directly. And by building those relationships across those lines of faith, we are able to do that. I think we're able to fight anti-Semitism in a better way, because they understand. They can't stand in my shoes, but they can understand it a little bit more.
Yeah, that is so important. The reference to the Presbyterian Church that Rabbi Prosnit just made, it was the stated clerk of the Presbyterian Church on Martin Luther King Day, who declared publicly that Israel engages in slavery. Those are the words: slavery, an apartheid state and slavery. And he was criticized, but has not walked it back. Just as a piece of history, in the 70s and 80s, it's probably not true today, Presbyterian Church in Westfield was the third largest Presbyterian church in the United States. And it was the largest east of the Mississippi River and raised more money for the missions of the Presbyterian Church than any other Presbyterian church in America. That's probably less so today. I don't know what the numbers are, but I mention that because you never know the influence that one person or one church can have. How does that translate? And first of all, I just want to say kol hakavod, which for the few of you who don't know what that means, well done, Rabbi Prosnit, in building the relationships that you have. How does that translate to people who are not rabbis and clergy? And that is, I think it translates in terms of the non-Jews that you may know or you may have as neighbors, and engage them in discussion, especially whether they're members of churches, congregations or not, and encourage them to encourage their own leaders to reach out. And if it's a Presbyterian that you happen to, let them know what the stated clerk of the church said last week, which was just adding fuel to the fire. And he said it a couple of days after the Colleyville. And he just said that was coincidental. It's just a terrible, terrible thing.
So there's a couple comments in here that relate to this a little bit, and I see Mark Epstein, and you have your hand up as well. So in Westfield next week on Thursday at 7 o'clock, there's how our community responds to hate. There's a panel conversation. Ed Israelo, who's a member of our congregation, is going to be speaking and sharing some feedback as well. I was invited. I was going to be out of town. I'm not going to be out of town anymore because of COVID, but there will be a presence there, and we are definitely I'm part of the Human Rights Relations Committee of the town as an advisor for them, and so Ed will be speaking on our behalf a little bit as the, and there's also the representative from Kean University who does a lot around, is that right, Ed? Around Holocaust education too, and she's, I think, on the panel too.
I don't.
Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, Maureen Mazaris and the superintendent of schools will be participating. Police chief will be participating, right. As will Jeremy Jenkins from the Presbyterian Church,
which is important, right? Which is great to have. So Ed, thank you for speaking.
Thank you, Ed.
President of AJC in our community too. So, and just being said, it's not just our faith leaders that need to speak out. It's also our school officials and our school leaders and our police and our mayors of any town that we live in. And I think it's important to have those dialogues with our local officials. It's our Senator Bramnick, right? We need to have him speak out in our congregation. It's our new assemblywoman. It's to really say, this is an issue and we want to make sure we hear it from them. And so I just sat down with the superintendent of our public schools in Westfield and shared my concerns and what is your curriculum looking like? And I encouraged them to share with our community, have a webinar of like, what's the Holocaust and anti-Semitism curriculum in the public schools? And it starts in first grade and goes up to 12th grade, and where are the touch points throughout that, and how can we continue to improve that? I think it's through education and making sure our elected leaders and our leaders of our communities are saying things. And hopefully when we encourage them to say it the first time, we don't need to encourage them every single time. That's my hope. Mark.
Go ahead, Mark. I'll come in after you. Go ahead.
Mark? Yeah. Through the recent discussions we've just been having, I would note that anti-Zionism has become a form of anti-Semitism. And I think we have to be alert to that and recognize that, as Bret Stevens points out, a lot of the criticism goes to Israel as a form of anti-Semitism.
Right. I want to comment on that. Before we leave that, just on the previous point, I also want to mention that Mayor Brindle has been exceptional, and she used the platform of Martin Luther King Day to speak at length about anti-Semitism in our community, which is very special. And whenever you get an opportunity to commend those who have spoken out, do so. Let them know that they are being heard. To Mark's point, anti-Israel inflammatory statements, such as the one that I mentioned from the Presbyterian Church and others, is certainly growing in numbers and in strength. And we need to call out those statements that are delegitimatizing of Israel. It's okay to be critical of Israel. I am, Rabbi Prosnit is, many of you are. When Israel does something that we feel is counterproductive and wrong or morally wrong, we have to speak out. And Jews do that. Christians have a right to do that as well. But we have to distinguish between legitimate criticism of Israel and delegitimatizing the entire country. There is an interesting situation at Westchester Reformed Temple in Scarsdale going on right now, where they hired a woman for their teen program a Jewish woman who turns out to be an anti-Zionist. I won't go into detail, but the synagogue took action and decided to terminate her. They're engaged in a lawsuit. It's not pleasant, but they stood up for what their mission is and what has to be done. So at whatever level, we have to stand up for that and distinguish between a legitimate critique of Israel, which is only fair and only honest, which happens in Israel, Israelis all the time, and delegitimatizing the country to the point where saying that the entire Zionist effort is unworthy, and where you apply standards to Israel that are not applied to any other country. That is not acceptable, and that has to be called out.
Absolutely.
Rabbi Prosnit, any comment on that?
I think you said it right, and I think I think we need to continue to call out that rhetoric on college. We see that a lot on college campuses, and we need to make sure that we continue just for locally in Rutgers. Rutgers president created an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with Tel Aviv University to do like some sort of cross-cultural and cross-study abroad, not exactly study abroad, but research together with Tel Aviv University. And there's been an uproar about that from Students for Just Palestine, and that, well, why should we have a relationship with Tel Aviv University, even if it's an academic university, even if it's a research university? But the president has said we need to have that relationship, and there is a petition out there, or just to thank the Rutgers president, to say thank you for making a strong relationship with Tel Aviv University and New Brunswick as well. And we need to make sure that those voices are heard. We see that on college campuses, and we'll continue to talk about it on college campuses. Every year we have a program with our 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, and we open it up to our community to talk about the BDS movement, to talk about what you will experience on how do you react to a professor that might say something anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, and that's important skills that we need to continue to build and also to speak out about.
Yeah. And that's really to David Golish's point in the chat room as well about anti-Semitism on the campus, and professors on the left as well as the right who are outright anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, and that David, that has to be called out at every turn. your guest a few weeks ago, and your friend David, was it Shea? Is it Scott Shea? Scott?
Yeah.
Yeah, made that point strongly.
And I just put in the chat box the thank you change petition that I signed. If you want to sign it to thank President Holloway about the Rutgers MOU with Tel Aviv University, you're more than welcome to sign.
That's, yeah. So apropos of that, and relating to upstanders who were mentioned earlier, there is a lot that's being done that's good and right by individuals and by universities and by organizations. Let's call that, stand up for that, not just calling out the bad, but to praise the good and to encourage people to get onto that wagon, because there are a lot of good people doing good things in that area. It's for another time, but the growth of anti-Israel on the left is alarming. It's just it seems to be growing every day, and that is extremely disturbing. What are your Rabbi Prosnit, where would you like to go at this point? We have.
So I think there's one topic that we haven't, that I think hits home directly, and that's our own security.
Please.
And our own sense of safety. Right. When I signed up to be a rabbi, I did not sign up to figure out COVID policies or medical policies. I was not trained in that, and I wasn't also trained in throwing a chair. Unfortunately, that's become a role of a rabbi. I did not sign up to have active shooting trainings. I did not sign up to look at a synagogue of a security. I was here to sign up. I became a rabbi because I wanted to build Jewish community. I wanted to bring joy to people. I wanted to bring the moments of our Jewish tradition alive. And that's why I'm a rabbi, and I will continue to be a rabbi. But also knowing that we have policies that we have to think about on a everyday level. And right, my kids should not have to worry. Like, luckily, I would say that my kids they did not know about this Texas incident. I have a 7-year-old, right? In a couple of years, they will need to perhaps know. And so I didn't have to explain going to synagogue they should not be concerned about my safety. And on an everyday basis, I'm not concerned about my safety at Temple Emanu-El. I feel that we have strong security. We update our security all the time. We don't always explain it, what's happening, because that would make us less secure. But we do have a system in place to make sure that when we are praying and when our students are in school, that we are safe. And of course, we can't say 100% safe, but I am confident what we are doing is the right thing and the right way to do it. Just for example, we got no calls from our preschool parents on Monday about dropping their kids off at school. In previous moments like this, we have had many calls from parents about their own children's security. I think that says a lot about people feel secure at Temple Emanu-El. But there's a balance, though, because we don't want to be a fortress. Well, we want to welcome people. We want to have people who look perhaps who are not Ashkenazic Ashkenazic Jews feel comfortable coming to Temple Emanu-El. And so we saw the balance of this when the rabbi in Colleyville welcomed in and offered tea. And we want to be hospitable. We want to be welcoming. We want to say, oh, you are a Jew, you're a Jew of color? Well, you're not going to be looked at differently, right? We have a refugee program that we support. We want to build those bridges as well. Do we look at our refugees differently in that sense, right? How do we build a place that is welcoming but also secure? And that's a balance that we will continue to look at. Right? When we drive by and you see those bollards, those are upsetting. That is an upset. They will look nicer, I promise. Everything's back delayed with the lights on them, and still there'll be lights hopefully soon. But it's disturbing. But the next day, after the Colleyville, Texas thing, I felt safer. It's a reality, right? I feel much more comfortable standing on our lawn and lighting the menorah with those in place now, just because where we're located and just because the world we live in. And so something going forward, we will have to balance the feeling of how do we welcome community in? How do we build community? And I think that's a part of everyone here as well. And how do we make sure that we are secure? We will continue to look at our security. We will continue to talk about offering active shooting drills. And we are looking at that as if that's something we want our community to learn about too. But it's also not just about our community, right? If you go to a movie theater, if you go to a grocery store, if you go to an airplane, if you go on an airplane, those are things that we have to unfortunately think about in this day of age as well.
I want to do a shout out for you and your team for the attention that you've given to this, smarts that you've given to this. You've got people who are professionals in the field of security and of law enforcement, who are members of our congregation, and others that you reach out to who think about this every day. And that's important. I know the
Federation has been a big player in that and help for Homeland Security grant. There are people that are really supporting us to make sure that we're making the right choices and the right decisions, but also making sure that we don't feel like a fortress either.
Yeah, Department of Homeland Security grant paid for all or most of the dollars, right? All of it?
All of it.
All of it, which is great. It's hard to think of it in this terms, but is it possible to think of the bollards, that's the, I guess, the technical name for the uprights. Is it possible to think of those as, even though they're intimidating, is it possible to think of those as maybe also giving us a chance to be more welcoming? I mean, the more secure we are, the more we might be welcoming, as opposed to being constantly concerned that we're insecure. I don't know, does that come into play at all? I don't know.
Yeah, I think the more we are aware, the more we have our security measures in place. We know how to welcome people in. I think there's an aspect of that we want to. I think there is a way people feel more comfortable and maybe feel more welcome because I feel safer there. And I want to be a part of this community.
Yeah. David notes that the good news is the JCC has a wait list and Temple's membership is up.
Absolutely. So right, I don't want we don't have that much time, and I have to prepare for Shabbat in a second, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? Like, so I think that's important, right? We are proud to be Jewish. David's right. Our Temple membership is up from the past year. We have a wait list on our preschool. There are a lot of people who want to feel proud to be Jewish. We had a lot of people online on Zoom last night, last Shabbat, and in person. COVID has become we don't always want to gather in person, but people feel really good about being Jewish, and that's what I said in my reflection. We fight anti-Semitism by saying we are proud. We are celebrating our Jewish tradition. We shouldn't be scared to do it, and the more we do it, I think the stronger we are as a community as well.
And we have a wait list for some of our preschool classes, right?
Yeah. So our preschool thing opens up this yesterday, and we'll have a wait list as well. We won't, unfortunately, we'll look at space as well. We have limited space, but we hope to continue to build our preschool, but we're at capacity, and we will. Nice thing is JCC, we work very closely with JCC to make sure that whoever wants a Jewish education can be a part of it, hopefully a part of our community or the JCC community, especially in the preschool age.
Okay, here's one. How should we respond to reverse discrimination, or is it a compliment? Like Archie Bunker's, if you are sick, get a good Jewish doctor, legal, get a Jewish lawyer. You Jews are smart, move to town with Jews because the schools will be excellent. That's heard from Asians. We and Jews always get along. Is intermarriage in our country having an effect upon people rethinking that maybe Jews are good people? This is Carol. Who is that's not sure which Carol that is, but thank you for that. I happen to believe that in terms of intermarriage, it's difficult to hate Jews if your granddaughter, grandson, or daughter-in-law or son-in-law is Jewish. It becomes more difficult. How do you respond, Rabbi? How would you respond to the reverse? You know, if you're sick, get a good Jewish doctor, that kind of stuff. Is that?
I would say get a good doctor, right? Do your research, find someone that's right. Okay, get the best lawyer you can, right? That's what I would say, right? I don't, not just because they're Jewish, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I would say, yeah, you want to do your best. You want the best doctor no matter what.
That's
right. You want the best lawyer no matter what.
That's right.
Right. I want to make sure. And so I think that's a tough one. I would say,
Sure.
oh, I'm looking for the best doctor, the surgeon that has the least shaky hands, right? That's what I want. I want the person that is up to date with all of the information. And if it's a Jewish person, wonderful. But actually, they're really more of they're a doctor.
That's right. And that goes.
That's how I would respond, right? So I want the legal.
And
I don't know if anyone else has another response to that, but that's kind of how.
And that goes for color, and that goes for gender, and all of the rest. Right. So in the 4 minutes, 3 minutes we have left, the final paragraph of Stephen's article. There's much to be thankful for. How things worked out in Texas, about the outpouring of love and support but the wise counsel for Jews is to be grateful for last week's good luck, while taking it as a warning that our luck in America may run out. Nobody knows the answer to that. Do you feel that our luck in America is running out?
I wouldn't be Jewish if I feel like my luck. I don't think so. I think we have to be aware. I think we have to have the skills. We have to build the skills. I think we need to be advocates. I think we need to build partnerships. I do not believe being Jewish is to be an optimist as well. And so I think that then why be Jewish? And so I believe we should be aware. But we need to continue. I think we need to continue thriving, and we need to be continuing being educated. And so just on this level, as a synagogue, we're committed to doing that. You saw in our e-blast this past week, we're partnering with the JCC on a documentary about the Tree of Life synagogue, and we're going to have a talk back with the director on Zoom in February. We are having an 8-hour conversation on February 14th, an update and skills that we can build. We're bringing back Amy Splatonic, who was the executive director of Integrity First for America, who spoke about the Charlottesville case a couple of years ago back, and we'll share a little bit more about that and what we can do on the ground around these conspiracy theories. And we're going to bring a speaker in about BDS. So the more education we have, I believe our luck won't run out.
Yep.
I saw some people that disagree with me, but I think differently.
You know, reasonable people can differ on this. Absolutely. There's obviously no right or wrong because we don't know. I subscribe to what Rabbi Prosnit has just said. I do remain an optimist. We have a lot of friends and a lot of people who are concerned. And I would urge you all to think about ways that you, in your own way, picking up on some of the things we've talked about today, can move this along in the right direction. I mean, a very simple thing that I would leave you with is to reach out to some of those people who have stood up in the last couple of weeks, whether it's Pastor Jeremy at Presbyterian Church or Mayor Brindle or You can name
Deacon Keith Gibbons, who's been with
Gibbons
us.
is it Holy Trinity? Gibbons, Deacon Gibbons at Holy Trinity. And let them know that what they did is important. You know, when public figures stand up and speak out, we don't get 5 letters. We don't get, sometimes we don't get 4 letters or 3 phone calls or an email. So if 2 or 3 or 4 of you let people know that those who are upstanders, and I like that term, those who are upstanders are important and appreciated, that makes a difference. So find a way to bring yourself into this conversation and this effort on a town basis and on a statewide basis. And if you're not hearing what you need to hear from people, let them know. Thank you all for being with us. This is I thought, a very enlightening conversation. We had way over 100 people on this, you know, with the screens and all, way over 100 individuals, about 67, 68 screens. It shows how much you care. I hope we won't have to have this conversation motivated by an event in the future, but we will surely continue the conversation. Rabbi Prosnit, you got a few things to do before Shabbat. Any final word?
Yeah, I thank you for joining us. Thank you for continuing the conversation. I always appreciate it when people respond to what I say. I got some, in my reflections on Friday, I got some questions why I didn't say something or why I said something. So that means people are listening. But I only know what you think if you let me know. And so I think that's really important to me. And we will continue to be a voice, and we will continue to speak out, and we will continue to be a wonderful, strong Jewish community. And that's who we are. So
And
I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
And
have a great night, and hope to see you on
thank you.
Zoom.
And think about the comment that Herb Mason left us with, possibly a list of upstanders. It won't be a complete one, but of upstanders. Somehow, if we could put that together, I think that would
Yeah,
be.
we could send that maybe out to everyone who signed up for this tonight.
Oh, that would be nice.
Probably not before Shabbat, but
yeah,
maybe
right, that'd be
next
great.
week.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom to all. Be well, be safe, be warm, stay warm, and stay safe. Shabbat Shalom.
Bye.